Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks. On this week's video we're going to be taking a closer look at the tone on one of the most instantly identifiable guitar solos ever recorded. We're of course talking about Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 by Pink Floyd, of course recorded by none other than Mr. David Gilmour. Now of course we're all incredibly familiar with David Gilmour as a player, or at least we should be, and the legacy in which he's created not only for himself but Pink Floyd's music. However, knowing that David Gilmour is a prolific Strat user, something about this particular solo had never quite added up for me, and it was this little clip that I saw recently which really aligned some dots.
I'd always fancied Les Paul. I'd tried them out at various times. I came across a rather beautiful gold-coloured Les Paul, and it was unusually had gold all the way on the back of the neck and everything, and that's the guitar I bought back in 1978, and that's the one I used on the solo on Another Brick in the Wall Part 2.
So, as someone who has an appreciation of Pink Floyd's music but wouldn't necessarily consider themselves an uber fan, I've not really delved into the minutiae of these kind of things or know particularly about the recording process of each individual album. As I said, this really aligned a few dots for me, realising that this guitar solo was actually recorded on a Les Paul. So, straight away I started doing a little bit of research into not only the equipment which was used, but the whole kind of recording process, because again, as much as I knew that this was recorded on a Les Paul with P90s, something about the sound of that solo just being so unique and so distinctive really sparked my interest in getting to the bottom of what it actually was. And turns out it's a pretty interesting story. Now, Mr. Bob Ezrin, the producer of The Wall, that album the solo is taken from, found a really cool, interesting quote by him which gives some insight into just the recording process generally. Couple that with some info I found on Gilmourish.com, and we have a pretty complete picture in regard to how they actually achieved this sound. Now, the quote by Mr. Bob Ezrin is as follows. People always ask me, how the hell did you get that astounding guitar sound at the end of Another Brick in the Wall? That's just Dave direct with a little compression. We used a form of double compression. First, we put the guitar through a very aggressive limiting amplifier, compressed that output, then overdrove it. The limiting amplifier makes it pop, and the compressor gives it this kind of density, the sound of being right in your face. Now, of course, this really piqued my interest, and the first thing that I want to try and achieve is to actually recreate this sound, a very analog, I should say, process. Try and recreate that digitally, as I tried to do recently with the guitar tone from John Lennon's Revolution, or the Beatles' Revolution, I should say. Try and recreate that within Logic. Now, I'm going to delve into it and hopefully kind of talk you through the process here and there, but as ever, please forgive me for not playing anything particularly overtly Floydy apart from the first couple of bars of the solo, just for fear of YouTube really clamping down on me and either demonetizing the video or making it unavailable in certain countries. But yeah, let's delve into it and see how close we can get. So before we get too technical, it's probably worth running you through my signal chain. First port of call being this Yamaha 502 Revstar in shot black, picked today primarily because of its similarities in a few key areas to that 55 gold top, namely the wrap over bridge and, more importantly I guess, two P90s which are going to be set in the neck position. That is running then into the Focusrite 2i2 interface with the input gain set at about halfway. Nothing drastic or nothing extreme happening there, as much as the temptation to try and achieve a slightly more compressed signal would be to push the input gain on that interface. As I've said, I've wanted to keep this a little bit more generic and hopefully allow you guys to try and achieve this through not specifically one use of any particular bit of hardware. Speaking of which, it is then running into Logic. Now, as per Bob Ezrin's description of this session and the process that they used to achieve this sound, I've tried to recreate that digitally. So, as I said earlier, this is going to be nigh on impossible to recreate, in its entirety perfectly, but I've tried to give you an understanding of what was achieved, or what was used, I should say, to achieve that sound. Namely, firstly, we have a limiter, then a compressor, and then lastly, guitar rig, which is set up to emulate a clean Mesa Boogie. Because, depending on what you read, I've used Gilmourish for this information, which is pretty much the Bible when it comes to David Gilmour. After the signal was limited and very heavily compressed, it was then run back into a Mesa Boogie and recorded to give it a little bit more kind of guitar ambience, I guess. So that is the last step of the chain. But prior to that, the two first important steps are going to be this limiter and the compressor. Now, it's worth mentioning that, again, as per Bob Ezrin's description of what happened, it is set pretty extreme. As you can see, the gain, the look ahead, and the release are all maxed, which is giving it an infinitely louder signal. and kind of the first stages of compression as well. But before we turn that on, we have something like this. As you can see, the notes are right, but it doesn't really sound like it. That's not going to change much, to be honest, when we turn on this, but we're going to get a much louder signal. As you can see, it's got much louder, which is going to really push the next stage of the chain that much harder, which is a compressor. Now, I'm not going to turn this on just yet for reasons you shall see in a minute. It is set very loudly. The ratio is 1:5:1. The knee is at 0.7, but crucially, the gain is all the way at +32, and the peak for the compressor, or the compressor threshold, I should say, is set down at -50. Now, if we back the channel strip volume off a little bit, turn that on. Apart from a load more level, the principal thing that we are getting with that is that compression, where it's really hanging on to the notes and giving it that pop and that bloom that you associate with this solo. However, it is the next step of the process where it all kind of puts the icing on the cake, really. So I'm going to leave the compressor off just because of its level for the time being, but we'll turn that back on. So within Guitar Rig, I have used, also worth mentioning, I've used another compressor here, actually, the VC160. Again, set pretty extreme with the threshold and compression max and the output gain at 3.8 decibels. However, it is the gratifier, which is Guitar Rig's digital emulation of a Mesa Boogie, set clean with the master pushed and the gain backed off. This is where it's going to really come to life. Also worth saying that the bass is pushed up to its max, and the mid, treble and presence are all backed off a little bit. We've got the match cabinet set just over kind of midpoint, I guess, with the air of 6.99, I guess, somewhere in that region. And then the last step in the stage is going to be this spring reverb to give it that slightly sort of ethereal sound that you tend to associate with Dave Gilmour. Now, if I turn this on and the compression simultaneously, hopefully it's going to be the magic wand, which kind of gets it pretty close to the actual sound. So there you have it. As I said, there's a few key factors which I think will inhibit me from ever kind of really nailing that. Principally the fact that those early Les Pauls with the P90s are incredibly special guitars which have an incredibly distinctive sound. I was lucky enough to play a 52 Gold Top recently, and those P90s are just absolutely magical. There's something about them just which I've never really heard in any other guitar. And as much as this Revstar is a beautiful guitar and really kind of got me in the ballpark, I think it's those P90s in particular which are one of the missing ingredients. In regards to other missing ingredients, as I said, this is an analog process that we are trying to recreate digitally, so there are always going to be some kind of discrepancies, I guess, for want of a better word. But the aim of this video overall was just to give you a better understanding of what was a fairly unique process, and to give you an appreciation that sometimes some really strange processes go on in the studio just to try and achieve some incredibly unique tones. So there we go. As ever, I've been Chris Buck. This has been Friday Fretworks. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next week for another video. Cheers, guys. Take care, and I shall see you soon.